Hey, having a little bit of trouble with my contact lenses this week and decided I'd go ahead and record this video for November 28th, 2024. Getting really close to the year 2025, lurking right around the corner, something I couldn't have even imagined when I was a teenager back in the 1990s. Yeah, almost, 25 years into the 21st century. I'm old enough to remember the 20th century. I remember if anybody ever watched The Sopranos, there's a scene where Tony Soprano tells Christopher, "You're going to lead this family into the 21st century." And he says, "We're already in the 21st century." 21st century was actually a novelty concept a long time ago. And now, with 25 years, quarter of a century into it. But this is actually the Thanksgiving week, and there's a slew of articles, like there has always been, about, well, more so now in the past 8 years than there has been prior, about what you are going to do if you have to deal with your family on the holidays in regards to political discussion. It's times like these that I'm almost kind of glad I'm estranged from all of my family and living an isolated existence where I don't have to get into the middle of all that. I've got pretty much people on both sides of the aisle when it comes to the political persuasions, and my own, I guess you could call them family. I don't know. I don't talk to them much anymore. Not most of them anyway. So I imagine Thanksgivings will be like they've always been, and like I always remembered growing up. A big, large portion of it will be taken up by shouting at one another and screaming, a few people getting drunk, and a few other people condemning the people for being drunk. We didn't need politics growing up to get at each other on the holidays. When I was a kid, it seemed like it didn't really take much of anything for everybody to scream at one another and say they were never going to speak again. But for this particular holiday thing, the one thing that I'm thankful for, since they're supposed to be thankful for something during this holiday, well, I tell you, there's nothing more miserable than trying to manufacture gratitude and happiness when you don't when you're really not vibing with it, and you really don't feel like you're not in the mood for being thankful, but yet you're told that you'd better be thankful. Damn it! You know, we've inherited some of the culture that used to be pretty pervasive in Britain. I don't know if it's as common any longer among the younger populations, of having that stiff upper lip. You got to pull yourself together. You got to put that chin up. You got to be grateful. You got to not show any emotions. You got to bury all your feelings deep down inside, and condemn people who do want to talk about emotions and feelings, because that's a sign of weakness. You know, get it together. Button your collar. Straighten up your hat. Don't wear your hat around backwards either. You know? But I do recall quite a few Thanksgivings in the fucking cult religion of Quackaholics Anonymous, and they were always really depressing affairs. I remember they either seemed to go one or two ways when I was involved in those. They were either packed to the gills with all the popular assholes who were going to lie and talk about how wonderful their life was since discovering AA, even though they seemed to do nothing but live in AA, and they were going to manufacture a few made-up stories about how awful it all was back in the days when they were drinking, and how horrible it all was, and how many times they went to jail on Thanksgiving, and these other horrible things. Christmas holidays, by the way, is the same things in the fucking cult religion. I am so relieved to be away from all of that. I even had a sponsor force me to serve Cokes and coffee at a fucking New Year's Eve dance one time. Now, you want to talk about depressing. Probably one of the most depressing things I ever went to was a goddamn AA dance on New Year's Eve. I mean, that I needed to get drunk after all that was over with. And I don't really feel that I did the wrong thing by getting drunk after all that was over with. So much for service work. But the Thanksgiving meetings were always a horribly depressing affair. You had to listen to all these phony lying gurus talking about how wonderful it all was, or you'd hear them talking about how awful it all is because, even though I'm sober, there's a lot of things that can't be mended, and I'm here in the spirit of service. I'm here to pollute the air with my presence. So all of you will have to listen to me, and I can bloviate with my own self-importance during these holidays. But it would be packed with that kind of garbage. Or you would go to a meeting one of the most depressing Thanksgiving meetings, well, actually, this was a Christmas Eve meeting that I went to one time, where I actually, of all fucking people, ended up chairing the meeting. That's how bad it was, because there was nobody there. There was a few people that were homeless. There was a few people that had been bussed in from treatment, but even most of the treatment centers were having their own in-house meetings, so there was only like 4 or 5 treatment center people. There were a few homeless guys. There were a few people who were actively intoxicated, and there was me. A few popular people showed up, and they poked their head in through the door, and they saw what kind of atmosphere it was, and they saw that all the people that they need to rub shoulders with and kiss up to, they weren't there. So I guess God and the 12 steps don't matter on nights like that, because they all got out of there just like that, just that fast too. So I ended up chairing one of these most depressing meetings that I can recall, although a lot of them were depressing. I ought to do a contest about that. What's the most depressing type of meeting you ever went to? Was it a tradition study? Was it a Christmas meeting? A Thanksgiving meeting? There's lots of lousy meetings when you've been in that thing for a very long time, but it was awful. I mean, I don't remember if I got drunk that night or not, but in the spirit of retrospect, I should have got drunk if I didn't. And if I didn't get drunk that night, I probably did later on. Couldn't string together any successful sobriety when I was in AA, but it's funny, since leaving AA and cutting all that toxicity out of my life and staying away from that horrible toxic culture, I've found it fairly easy to not drink any longer. Speaking of which, and that's going to be kind of the topic for this video, so oftentimes I hear people come at me on here with, well, what is your solution? What is your solution? You don't have a solution. All you do is complain about how much you hate AA. And I've said before, and I'm going to say it again, yes, I don't have to have a solution for fanatical, pseudo-religious cult bullshit, because that is not an actual solution for drinking. The actual solution for drinking is going to be as varied as there are individuals, because unlike AA and its cult religious programming, I don't believe everybody who's addicted is some morally degenerate, god-awful human being that just doesn't have one redeeming quality about him whatsoever, that deserves to be at the whims of these old-timer assholes that exploit them and bully them for the remaining years of their existence. I don't believe that's the case at all. As a matter of fact, I think most people with addiction problems are just that. People with addiction problems. I'm adjusting my glasses so the camera glare doesn't make me look like I got 2 glowing eyes here, but it doesn't look like I can take care of that problem. I don't believe there's a blanket solution from an addiction problem, and that too is the topic for this video. I think it's time to have an honest conversation about addiction. After speaking of addiction, hit this vape. This flavor is out of this world fantastic. And by the way, when you're done with these, you just throw them in the garbage. There's no oil, there's no coil changing, there's none of that. You buy this, you use it, you toss it. And I don't think if it were for these, I would have ever quit smoking. I think I'd still be lighting cigarettes if I had to fuck with those mechanical whatever they are, type vapes. But an honest conversation about addiction. Speaking of which, I'm going to post a link in this video to a channel called Thrive Alcohol Recovery or Thrive Recovery, something like that. I don't know the lady personally, and her videos are not going to be like mine, where I'm just going after AA and pointing out all the illogical inconsistencies and the downright toxic and nasty culture that permeates within the 12-step religion. But she does have a lot of interesting videos about the science of addiction and about naltrexone and other things like that. I think a lot of people could benefit from that. But one key point she made in a video not too long ago was, why can't we normalize people struggling with addiction? And I couldn't agree with that more. Why can't we just make it normal? Nobody judges people as being garbage human beings if they struggle with quitting smoking. Nobody treats people like they're garbage human beings if they overeat or something like that. And I'm not saying they should. Remember that. I'm going to clear this up a little bit more as I go on with it. But when it comes to drinking and drugs, boy, do we have some strong reactions to that in society. Oh, you're a drunk. Are you drinking right now? Well, you just get the fuck out of my face. Get out of my face. You're a drunk. You're a drug addict. You're a junkie. You're this, that, and the other. That's programmed behavior. Programmed behavior from a long, long history of making drinking or making addiction problems a stigmatized thing. and a near borderline moral panic about it, and a near religious approach to it, to the point that we can't have honest conversations about addiction. And I think, in the spirit of giving thanks, and rather than phony gratitude, I think that we should be grateful. Yeah, I actually use that cult word. For living in a century now where more information is available at the touch of our fingertips, where we can find out that most of the superstitious program religious bullshit that we've been indoctrinated with is blatantly false. I do want to get one thing out of the way before I go a little bit further. There's a lot of people who have come at me with, well, you can't not make addiction serious. Addiction is serious. People die from addiction. People kill other people in drunken accidents, and people destroy their health, and people do all these god-awful things in the name of addiction, because they're addicted to mind-altering substances, and I'm aware of that. I have, and I'm not proud of it, I have 3 DUI convictions in my background, and that's not something I'm proud of. The thought of getting behind the wheel of a car while intoxicated is a very terrifying thought to me when I think about it. But let me ask you this question. With all the fear-mongering we've got around addiction, with all the threats of death we got around addiction, with all the horrible consequences and the after-school specials in the 1980s that made everybody who drank or smoked a joint looking like the worst people on the planet, has that done anything for the benefit of people who have addiction problems? Because I do remember very well during this pandemic that we came out of, how they were talking about the high rates of addiction and alcohol abuse that just skyrocketed through the roof when people were locked down, meaning that most people turn to alcohol as a stress reliever, as a coping mechanism, not because they're morally defective and blaspheming against the stupid AA God in the sky that wants you to inventory when you stole a candy bar in kindergarten for the rest of your life. No, it's because it is a relaxant. I don't know if that's actually a word, but it relaxes you. It makes, you drown your troubles away. There must be 10 million songs about how wonderful it is to drink. If you put in the country music industry, there's probably 50 or 60 billion songs about it. But all the fear-mongering and all the fear tactics and all the scare tactics and all the stiff penalties and all the bad laws. In fact, there was one group of people who were trying to lobby so that every car manufacturer has to put a breathalyzer in their car. So everybody all over the entire country has to blow in that breathalyzer before they can even start their own car. I don't think that's going to work. And I don't think it's going to solve anything. Even if you have some elaborate camera system where someone has to blow in order to get behind the wheel of a car, I don't think that's going to do one goddamn thing to curb addiction rates. It's just going to make people who have drinking problems continue to have drinking problems, okay? It's not doing anything to address addiction at hand, because our society exists for the people in charge in our society, the do-gooders and all of that. They exist primarily for 2 things: to punish people and to make a lot of money. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of money that's going to change a lot of hands if they ram that through legislation. Although, with the government we got right now, I don't know if anything is certain whatsoever. But that has been the predominant attitude for as long as I can remember, even all the way back, even before I was here, that was a prevailing attitude in the 1960s. All those creepy hippies that are hitting that damn devil drug called weed, The 1930s movies called marijuana. Marijuana makes you do horrible things. It rots out the brain. It turns you into some kind of inhuman monster and all that kind of stuff. You should look up some of those 1930s movies. There was even a couple of them where, why, this woman here believes that you can have intimate relationships and not even be married. And she's heading down the path of, all these unspeakable acts and all this other shit. Yeah, that's actually socially acceptable at one point to talk like that. It's done no good to curb the addiction problem. And the reason that it's done no good to curb the addiction problem is because we don't have honest conversations about addiction. We're so interested in punishing people, and the billion-dollar-a-year treatment industry sure as fuck doesn't want addiction to go away. They want people to be hooked on drugs and alcohol. They want the never-ending churn rate to go on in the treatment centers. I said on, I meant to say to go on. They want that. They need that. It's what keeps their fat fucking bank accounts going. It's what keeps them allowed to open up more rehab centers and halfway houses so they can even make more money off the misery and death of other people. even though it does nothing to solve the problem of addiction, even though that we still continue to push this outdated notion that you're not as good of a human being if you drink. Even if you are a severe alcoholic, you can never return to normal drinking because the big book says so. And in doing all of that, we have not got one step closer to dealing with people who struggle every day, daily, with horrible addiction problems. You hear on the news about stuff like the fentanyl crisis, and you have all these AA guru assholes that say, well, that's not alcoholics. Now, I realize in your stupid, phony fucking cult religion, God doesn't give a shit about you unless you're working steps, unless you have a drinking problem. If you picked up a bad batch of fentanyl because you got hooked on it, that just doesn't matter. AA shouldn't be involved in that. They have no opinions on outside issues because they're such fucking cowards that they don't want to really admit under pressure that they are just a religion. A phony scam religion that operates like a corporation where the top people in the New York GSO, GSR office, or whatever the fuck they're called, make 6 figures a year off of this religious disease, or this spiritual disease. Absolute, utter nonsense. You know, back in the 1980s, the police officers used to come to the school. I'm sure they were glad. They were like, well, wait a minute. Maybe they weren't glad. Maybe they were saying, I got to deal either with criminals over here in Camden who might shoot me dead in the middle of the broad daylight, or I got to go to a fucking elementary school. Send me to Camden with all the criminals, you know. But they would come and they would tell us all the bad effects of addiction. And it was just say no due to Nancy Reagan. And that was in all the classrooms. Just say no. There was even a sitcom appearance with the Reagans where a little kid says, Ms. Reagan, I actually was offered drugs the other day. You know, like you're really going to tell the First Lady of the United States, if you're a 4th grader, I've been offered drugs. Yeah, we're really going to do something like that. It didn't do any good, right? I smoked marijuana when I was 15 years old, and you know what happened? Or 14 years old, and I said, well, shit. All this stuff that I was hearing about, how I was instantly going to start snorting coke and robbing banks, didn't happen. They were fucking lying to me the whole entire time. So any of that programming went right out the window. You had the Partnership for the Drug-Free America, which was actually, it put out all those terrifying commercials and tried to scare you when they're not doing drugs. And it tried to shame people who were drug users. And it turns out that the Partnership for a Drug-Free America, this wasn't soccer moms that were concerned about their kids' well-being. No, this was pharmaceutical companies and alcohol companies. When's the last time you saw Budweiser sitting down with Big Pharma? Hey, you know, we got a major problem in this country. I'm going to keep selling my beer, and you can keep selling your pills, but we got to do something about these fucking awful drugs. I'm sure that their intentions were 100% pure. I'm sure they just didn't want little kids on drugs, but maybe it might have had something to do with too many people smoke pot. They might not buy Budweiser, and they might not buy all these wonderful pharmaceutical drugs like Vioxx, you know, that did what it did to people, and all the other disasters that they have put out. Was it Celebrex or one of those? Anyway, this is not an anti-medication channel, but yeah, just think about that for a minute. The pharmaceutical companies and the alcohol companies became bedfellows so they could push for the Partnership for the Drug-Free America. Nothing suspicious about that at all, right? And it didn't do any good. It didn't do any good whatsoever. We have not curbed the rates of addiction in this country. We have not done it. We have not been able to punish addiction into not existing. We've not been able to convert a bunch of people to a stupid cult religion to the point that the alcohol sales are declining. Have you ever heard of any alcohol sales in this country declining because so many people are getting saved by the 12 steps? And of course, AA has a get out of jail free card for every bit of this. Well, these people aren't alcoholics, you know. Yeah, just this tiny little percentage of the population who don't drink themselves to death or die. This tiny little minute percentage of the population who find success in AA did so because God loves them more than everybody else. And that's just how it should be, right? We shouldn't really have honest conversations about addiction. We shouldn't really look at the fact that addiction is multifaceted. We shouldn't look at the fact that there are people out there that got addicted to alcohol not because of trauma, not because of some childhood thing, not because of some spiritual defect, but because it felt good and they like doing it. That does happen to people. That actually is a driving force for a lot of people. It's not that complicated. There are people like me who drank because of a multitude of issues that I could go into for this channel, but that does not That does not apply to everybody. I'm tripping over my own words and doing my famous gaps here, so you'll have to forgive me when I get carried away by it. We don't have honest conversations about addiction, really, not in the mainstream public, and it's not because of a shadowy conspiracy. Anytime you hear about a conspiracy, it's not because of some shadowy group of guys in a basement somewhere with a giant television screen, and they all look like representatives of the Umbrella Corporation that are there to tell you, well, we got to do something to this population. We got to. Now it's generally moronic idiots that just make billions of dollars and want to make billions more. I irritated somebody one time about that when they were talking about a conspiracy, and I said, well, maybe the people at the top are just as clueless as all of us down here and don't know what to do either. Maybe they're just kind of fumbling along in the dark like the dumbasses they seem to be. I mean, they're not the best and the brightest up there at the top, obviously. But they don't want addiction to go away because it's a good cash cow. There's your conspiracy. We got a lot of money we can make off of this. We can capitalize off of this. Who gives a fuck if it works or not? By the time half the country's dead from drug overdoses and fentanyl overdoses, our savings accounts will be giving in 7 digits in interest alone. What does it matter? That's why you don't have an honest conversation about addiction. That's why there are people who are not interested in solutions. Now, as far as the cult true believers, there's only really a couple of different things that I can really see for them. They can either become like I have, where they finally just see through the bullshit of it, realize they've been duped, and there's never too late for that. I have subscribers that were in AA 22 years. I have subscribers that said they were in AA since the 1980s that just recently walked away from it. You can walk away from a cult. You don't have to keep believing a lie because you're afraid you'll lose everything if you stop believing the lie. As for them, I don't know if they really think about it one way or the other. I think they're too brainwashed. A lot of the old timers I saw that didn't have no vision, didn't have no solutions, they didn't have any of those things. They were there for one purpose: to exploit the newcomers, to find new victims, and to feed their fragile sense of self-importance by bullying everyone in those rooms and telling the same fucking stories over and over again about a DUI they got back in 1975 when they beat up 20 police officers and all this other shit. Which made me think, I do remember a sponsor I had. He said, I'm not afraid to fist fight anybody. I fist fought cops. I fist fought made members of the mafia. I beat up members of biker gangs. I beat up street gangs. No, you fucking didn't. That's a goddamn lie. For one thing, if you had beat up a cop, you'd be doing some serious time in prison. That is one thing that they can even charge you with attempted murder on if they feel like it, if those judges feel like throwing that at you, if you beat one up too badly. You have not punched a made member of the mafia because you would not be here if you did. You have not beat up street gang members. And most motorcycle club members, I guarantee you would have a hard time beating one of those guys up because they probably done been in 10 million trillion fist fights of their own before they even got to you. So no, you can dispense with this made up badassery shit and this little cock energy that you're pushing here, trying to act like an alpha of some sort. Believe it or not, the alphas generally, the wannabe alpha male badasses generally tend to be the biggest cowards, I have noticed. And anyway, I was going to make a little side note there, but I'm not going to do that. Addiction affects a lot of people in a lot of different ways, and they get addicted for a lot of different reasons. There doesn't have to be one blanket solution that can apply to everybody, everywhere, all the time. In fact, I think that's ludicrous to suggest that. I think AA people are often presupposing that when they ask me, what is your solution? They're saying that you have to have this answer for everybody, everywhere, all the way across the board that works for every single person all the time, or you just can't criticize AA because AA lies and promises that it can do that. But that's not really true, is it? Somebody who grew up in a certain type of economic environment and class and certain type of home life is going to be completely different than someone else who came from another economic class of a different type of stature and came from a different type of home life versus someone else that came from an abusive home versus someone else that came from another type of home, etc., etc., etc. You can't just cram it all together. And if you did cram it all together, you could understand that if any organization pretends to do that, they're probably wanting to make money off of it. These are individual problems, and guess who they can be solved by the most? The individual. I don't pretend to have blanket solutions and answers for every single one of you who watch this. How could I? I don't know your life. I don't know your background. I don't know what kind of things you've been through or what the kind of things you've not been through. And the loved ones around you don't either. Nobody else has your experiences. Nobody else has your fingerprints. Nobody else has your DNA, to my knowledge. Only you know what's best for you, and only you know how to approach it. We don't have to have this all or nothing idea about addiction to where, oh my God, I drank a beer even though I used to be a drunk a long time ago, so therefore I'm a terrible human being who's got to now go on a full-blown relapse because I did that, because it's either this way or no way at all. That's terribly fallacious thinking, that's terribly illogical thinking, and it's harmful thinking. Uh, if you check out Ben the Stigma's channel, you hear me talk about the use of, THC or the use of CBD or the use of cannabis in getting off heroin. Yes, in my opinion, if someone went from being a severe heroin addict to someone who smokes marijuana, they've done a lot of wonders. That's up to them to decide. That's up to them to do. They got the right to save their own fucking life, just like all of us do. If someone who used to drink a half-gallon of vodka a day has got it down to a six-pack of beer a day, they're doing pretty fucking good. I choose not to drink today because I've just had too many horrible experiences and damn near destroyed my health as a result of it, so I choose total abstinence. But I choose it. Not because I'm powerless, not because I'm a defective individual that needs something in the sky there to reach into my brain and remove my obsessions, but because I choose to. Only you can work out what's good for you. But the treatment centers, the AA meetings, and all those things, they're not really interested in your well-being. They're interested in continuing to perpetuate their existence, whether you're alive or not, whether you survive or not, whether you get better or not. It's completely, totally up to you to take control of your own recovery or whatever you want to do and figure out how you want to do it. That's the honest conversation we need to be having around addiction. The honest conversation around addiction is that it's multifaceted and it's varied upon different individuals for different reasons. And recovery, if you want to use that word recovery, is going to look different for everybody else. So what if you smoke pot to quit drinking? So what if you smoke pot to quit doing heroin? So what if you don't smoke pot, but you want to have a drink every once in a while? Only you know that. I could get up here and fearmonger you and tell you that, yeah, after I have a few drinks, I have a tendency to want to get behind the wheel and drive. That was one of my motivating factors in staying away from alcohol, but would it do any good? You know, if you showed me every single article about every single horrible drunken driving accident where all these people were killed due to someone driving intoxicated, would that stop me from actually having a drink if I truly wanted to drink? I don't think it would. We got to put past, in my opinion, the stigmas, the fear-mongering, and all this other stuff that we've been doing, and stop doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. But those are my opinions on the matter, and I'm sure everybody has their own opinions on the matter. But yeah, like the lady's channel, burn the damn stigma. Get rid of the stigma around being addicted. Like the lady whose channel I'm going to post down here below with the Thrive Alcohol Recovery. Let's normalize the fact that people struggle with addictions. Let's not force people to hang out in their closet somewhere drinking alcohol because they're living in terror that their own family members will find out they're drinking. You know, that is one reason, by the way, why alcoholics lie. According, AA, alcoholics lie. Everything they'll say is a lie. They've never heard of Epimenides' paradox, I don't guess. Which, by the way, I think is actually solvable, but that's beside the point there. Why do you lie when you have a drinking problem? Because you know the trouble it's going to cause. You know how many times that I have encountered a family member, are you drinking right now? No, I'm not drinking right now. Probably because you know what kind of shit's going to happen. I remember going home one time and doing what AA people told me and saying, look, guys, I want to be honest. I did have a few drinks today, and I just wanted to tell you guys the truth about that. Give us your car keys. Give us your wallet. You're not going out of this house for a week or something like that. You're not going to infantilize somebody into deciding they want to quit drinking, and we need to stop treating people with addictions as being less than everybody else and treating them as the human beings they are who just happen to have an addiction problem, in my opinion. But anyway, that is my take on it on this Thanksgiving Day, November 28th to 2024. I wonder when 2025 gets here if I'm still going to be signing 24 for the next few months like I'm wont to do. Chime in the comments and let me know what you think. Don't you think it's time we move past this superstitious stigma, this idea of treating everybody with an addiction problem as being less than everyone else? Don't you think it's just high time that we embrace the fact that people have addictions? Just like, people have other alternative lifestyles that they like to live. Not everybody fits into the old 1950s Norman Rockwell painting of family life and all that other kind of thing. And life, and the United States of America is not a bunch of quaint little Rockwell small towns where everybody has this Midwestern charm about one another. Everybody has a different idea of what an ideal life looks like, and I think they should be free to pursue that. I will see you guys next week, and the next time I see you, it'll be December of 2024. See you guys next week. I don't have a subscriber comment this week. I didn't get around to getting to Best Buy and getting myself another printer, but the printer is just gone. It's funny. A long time ago, you had repairmen for like weed eaters and printers and those types of things. And last summer, when I said I wanted to get my weed eater repaired, the guy looked at me like I was crazy. He said, "We don't repair weed eaters anymore. You just throw them away." I used to know television repairmen back in the day that made a pretty good living at that. I wonder, is that still a field? Are there any television repairmen out there? Can you chime in on the comments and let me know? Do you still have a job out there, or has that become obsolete as well? With the flat screens and all of that, unlike those gigantic monsters I had back in the 80s. All right, now I'm just rambling to hear myself talk. See you guys next week.